Konrad Curze, or better known as the Night Haunter, is known for being one of the most terrifying entities that has ever bestowed his face upon the galaxy. The Primarch of the Night Lords would instill amongst them his tactical acuity of wreaking havoc and terror throughout any planet or adversary that they may face. In fact, amongst the Great Crusade, it was common knowledge and very well known their reputation, so much so that should they ever visit a planet and the planet was made aware that it was the Night Lords that were going to visit them, out of pure terror, fear, and panic, they would often surrender on the spot. But what was it that created the quote-unquote Night Haunter? How did Konrad Curze end up to the point that he was, driven so mad, insane, filled with rage and hate? All of this would start when the Primarchs were scattered amongst the galaxy. Konrad Curze would find his pod dispersed onto the planet of Nostromo. This was already an extremely bleak planet, filled with nothing but despair, tragedy, horrors of its own kind, but mostly amongst its people. A planet forever covered in perpetual darkness and also riddled with criminals around every single corner. Nearly no person or individual was innocent. In its own way though, this is exactly what would keep the population in check. You see, Nostromo was a hive world that was pretty much overruled by the ruling elite. But back to Konrad Curze. My point in explaining all of this is that Konrad would not be fortunate enough to find himself amongst the ruling elite. He would find himself just as well as in the back alleys of all the other thieves and criminals alike. And despite being an infant or child when roaming the streets, he would not be taken in by a loving family. In fact, he wouldn't be taken in by any family. There was nothing but criminals and thieves around, so Konrad Curze was left to raise himself. He would roam the streets and alleys, escaping any of those that would cause him harm and surviving on nothing but the feral creatures that roamed the same alleys as he did. Like many of his brothers, he was bestowed with one of the gifts of the Emperor, if you can call it a gift at that. You see, he was gifted the gift of foresight. But unlike Sanguinius, who looked at this foresight with many possibilities and which may be the best option, Konrad Curze was plagued by these foresight visions and only saw that which would haunt him in darkness, bearing witness to only that of the worst possible futures. In his youth and witnessing all the crime that plagued Nostromo, he took it upon himself to take up a role of a vigilante of the sorts. And although it may sound righteous, he decided to fight crime with what can be described as even worse crime. Known criminals and oligarchs that were considered corrupt would have their bodies scattered throughout the city and be found gutted like mere feral creatures. Some bodies were found in the condition where they were nearly impossible to identify. And before you know it, within a year of him beginning his vigilante spree, Nostromo's crime rate would plummet out of fear of facing what would become known as the Night Haunter. Families would tell tales if their children misbehaved, the Night Haunter would come to visit them. A curfew would be put into place throughout Nostromo so that those would not be tempted to wander the night and commit crime. Society and culture as a whole throughout the whole planet would begin a massive reformation, all thanks to the hauntings of the Night Haunter. Those few nobles that Curze did manage to spare, or rather that survived his vigilante spree, would eventually encounter Konrad Curze themselves, which, not long after, he would be imposed as the new monarch over Nostromo. Before you know it, the Emperor would come to Nostromo, and Konrad Curze would soon meet his father. But at the sight of his father, Konrad Curze would receive yet another horrifying vision, one so severe that he attempted to claw his own eyes out. Yes, even at this age, Konrad Curze would still be plagued by all the dark foresight visions that would still come to him in passing. Upon meeting the Emperor and his brothers, he received this vision, where he would bear witness to the fates that awaited all of them. All of these visions were dark in nature. He would bear witness to the Emperor interned on the Golden Throne. He would see the slaying of all the brothers that he met there. And as his life would go on, these visions would only plague him more and more. So Morningstar, you ask, what turned Konrad into this rage-filled creature? I would say it is unfortunately his gift of foresight that he didn't have anybody to teach him how to use properly. It was the growing up on Nostromo and seeing all the crime and hate that riddled its street and surface. From the very beginning, he would see dark futures that would eventually come to pass without fail. Bearing witness to horrors beyond belief from a young age could be nearly unbearable for anybody, even for that of a Primarch without any guidance. So while Konrad Curze did haunt the night and the dark futures haunted him. But that's just my opinion as to what eventually led him down his ever so dangerous and terrifying path. But with that being said, thank you as always guys for listening, and I hope you all enjoyed this video. Drop a comment if there's anything you guys want to hear about next, and as always, remember to follow for more.